Alright, before we get into anything with It Chapter 2, can we please talk about that Doctor Sleep trailer that was incredible? I cannot wait. That must be my most anticipated movie. Like, I know I said that about Joker last week, and I say that about The Rise of Skywalker, obviously, but Doctor Sleep looks so good. I love The Shining. It might be my favorite horror movie of all time, and now we're getting Doctor Sleep with Ewan McGregor. Like, come on, Rebecca Ferguson, it looks incredible. So, anyways, let's get that out of the way. I just saw It Chapter 2 at a dine-in theater. It was super nice. It was awesome. This review is coming out a little bit late. I'm going to do a spoiler review instead of a non-spoiler like I usually do. So this will be your friendly spoiler warning. If you guys have not seen It Chapter 2, do not watch this. It's going to be a recap and review. So we're going to talk all spoilers throughout the entire movie, what I liked, what I didn't like, and my overall thoughts on the movie and how things went down. So if you guys have not seen the movie, obviously click off of this review, but just know that I really enjoyed this movie. Almost loved it, not quite. There are some definite issues throughout this entire movie that I will get into as I recap throughout the entire thing. But overall, I think if you are a fan of the first one, definitely go check this one out. And if you are a fan of horror movies and you have not seen the first It, I think it's worth it just because of the cast and the group of kids and now these adults that are in these movies that is just absolutely fantastic, and the director does a great job getting this cast to act the way that they do, and it's great. So let's get into this, starting with the very beginning of the movie. So let's get into the recap and review for It Chapter 2. So this movie starts off with a hate crime. Yes, that is right. It's pretty brutal. This movie is actually really dark. Compared to the first one, it has a lot more scenes just like this one, and it's really hard to watch, mainly because of the subject matter and how just like frustrating it is that it's happening. But that is how this movie starts. But it's a good indication to show Mike's character that it is back and he needs to go and gather all the other people because he's the only one who has not left Derry. Everybody else has moved on with their lives. They've actually forgotten everything that happened when they were kids, which is an issue that I have slightly with. I understand why they did it, and I know it's in the book. Obviously, everything I say in this review, if it's in the book, I know it's in the book. Everything is probably in the book, but I have some issues with just the storytelling in general. But, everybody else in the cast forgot what happened when they were kids. So Mike has to go out, gather everybody else, tell them to come back to Derry because there is some stuff going down and it is back. And this is how it shows in this awesome opening scene. I actually really liked how this movie opened up. And this is where we get into cutting between all the different characters, Mike calling each character, seeing where they are at in life. And I enjoyed seeing where everybody else was. And most of the things in this movie, most of the scenes that I didn't like, not the scenes that I didn't like, it's the structure of how they put together this entire plot that I didn't really like too much. But the scenes themselves, seeing where all these characters were and just seeing how well the cast is and how perfect casting they did, making these kids grow up. And I kind of wish they waited 27 years to make this movie, because I think if they did, this is exactly what it would be like. It would also have, the nostalgia factor. Remember that movie that came out 27 years ago and they're finally doing a sequel? That's what it felt like. This movie, it felt like that because of the casting was so great. So we go on, see each character and where they've been for the past 27 years. Bill is going to be me in about 15 years, which is great to know. And so he's, writing scripts in Hollywood on the Warner Brothers lot, making a horror movie that apparently the ending of his movies and all his books are absolutely terrible. Beverly has moved on, is now in an abusive relationship, which, obviously, the first movie she had an abusive relationship with her father. It was all bad, and now she's back in a relationship just like that, which sucks. Ben is now skinny. He's a very, very successful, I think, architect. So he's doing very well in life. Obviously, Mike stayed at home and isn't really doing anything. Eddie married someone that looks just like his mom. They use the same actress who played his mom. I think they use the same actress, but that was kind of the joke. He ended up marrying that. And then Bill Hader's character, Richie, he is a famous comedian. And last but not least is the one and only Stanley. And this is where we get probably our most dark subject matter throughout this entire movie that I do have major issues with. Stanley, at the very beginning of the movie, takes his own life when he finds out the news that everybody's going back to Derry. And I guess, I'm going to mention this now that I just thought of just here in the moment. Did he remember stuff? Did he remember what happened? Because in the letter at the end of the movie, he says this is the only way that like this is a strategic move by him because he knew he was too afraid to go back. Does that mean he remembered when everybody else forgot? I don't know. That whole storyline just bothers me. But he does. He takes his own life. So when everybody groups back together, back in Derry, in this Chinese restaurant, they are all there without Stanley. And it is an awesome scene of them all being back together. The chemistry, everything coming back to them. And, you know, even watching this scene, me, myself, thinking back to my childhood, I thought of some stuff that I haven't thought about in years. And I remember some things about my old friends that I used to hang out with in middle school and elementary school. Some memories that I thought I never had before. And this is the power of this movie. This group of friends really just, it works so well, and especially if you're in that age group where you haven't talked to these people in years, and you see and you remember stuff like this. It's crazy. The scene is awesome. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. And then things get crazy as soon as they get the fortune cookies and they find out what happened to Stanley. This scene is awesome. One of my favorite things in the entire movie. This cast, the chemistry, it just all worked. And Bill Hader is incredible in this entire sequence. I love him in this movie. And I know I did not review the first It when it came out back in 2017 because I did not have my channel up and running like it is now back then. So I didn't get a chance to tell you guys what I really didn't like about the first movie, which I absolutely love the first It movie, don't get me wrong. But the first third of the movie is very much you're watching one character and then you're going to the next character and going to the next character and they all get scared separately. And it's not until they get together where it really starts to shine. And what this movie does is it splits up all the characters, having them go on each of their own different adventures, trying to find these relics that they need to defeat It by the end of the movie. And it has the same problem that I had in the first one, just much more harsh. The entire beginning of this movie is very choppy. You know, you're getting Mike calling all these different characters. It feels very rushed by the time they all get to Derry. There wasn't enough reason to get them there, but I think there was reason enough, just not as much as I think it could have really needed, you know. And then they go and split off, which I thought, this is probably the thing that confused me most about this movie. After they go from the Chinese restaurant, right, and they all split off into different cars, into different groups, they all still end up back at the library or wherever. Because, like, isn't Ben saying that his stuff is there? But why would his stuff be there if they just first met back at the diner? It makes no sense. I don't understand the timeline of these events that's happening. It really confused me. But it did get them to try to go throughout the plan. And Mike is able to convince Bill to convince everybody else that we all need to get these relics from our past to remember things so we can go down and defeat it once and for all. And so now we're in the second act of the movie, and this is where the movie starts to get really long in the tooth because you're following each character and their child counterpart character go through different horror sequences until you get through all 6 of them, because now Stanley is gone, so now it's just 6 of the group, and you go through each and every single one of them as they go through, and most of them have a sequence when they're kids and they're having flashbacks, remembering something that happened to them in that time gap between in the first It movie after they ran out of the Neibolt Street house, and then they're like Stanley punches Bill in the face, and they all split up for about a month. That is the timeline which they flash back to, which I think is really cool. That is genius. I heard that they were doing flashbacks with the kids in this movie, and I thought, what is the timeline that they would be able to do this in? And that is the perfect opportunity to do it. The only problem is the way that this movie is edited together. It just goes from like Bill, and then Bill as an adult, and then it goes to Beverly, and then Beverly as an adult, and it goes to Eddie, and then Eddie as an adult, and it goes to, you know, it just goes through all of them, and it's very frustrating how it feels so long and it feels so unnecessary, because those scenes really should have been in the first one. And I have a point at the end of the video that I'm going to making a master cut of both these movies combined. That could be really cool, but this entire second act felt long, whereas in Avengers Endgame, you know, which I'm going to compare this to Avengers Endgame because both of them are very long movies, and both of them are supposed to conclude a huge storyline. Obviously a 22 movie storyline versus a only 2 movie storyline. So this sequence, if they kind of grouped up together instead of completely splitting up like dumb characters do in horror movies, I think it could have felt a lot more smooth. You could have had some of their relics be in similar places, and they could have gone into different groups. And I think it could have been cool to pair different characters together, and instead of always having Beverly with Ben and Bill, and always having Richie and Eddie together, they could have done some cool stuff, had some cool pairings throughout the groups. But other than that, they just decided to go through each character. And there's also a subplot going on with Henry Bowers. He is back. I thought he died at the end of the first movie, but he's back in this one, all grown up in like a mental hospital prison. And he breaks out. Pennywise gets him out, gives him his knife back, and now he is on a mission to either kill the Losers Club or just help Pennywise get to them. And I think it worked very well at first. I love how they brought him back into the fold. That entire storyline doesn't really go anywhere because they get rid of that character by the end of all these sequences with each character after he attacks Mike in the library, and then that's all completely over with. So it doesn't have too much to do with the overall story, but it is in there, and I liked most of it, but it just felt very inconsequential to the grand scheme of things. And I will say, out of all these scenes that they go to individual characters, my favorite is probably Beverly's. You see a huge portion of this in the trailer, but it's when Beverly goes to her old house, and she's talking to this old woman about her father and how nobody really ever dies in Derry, and the creepy old naked lady is running towards her. But you get to see some backstory to Pennywise and kind of the persona that he took over. Not the mystical like alien that it actually is, but the character of Pennywise. You get a backstory of him being like a person going to Derry. You know, he went to the carnival, he went to the circus, and he became this clown, and that is what Pennywise has kind of based himself off of. And so that was really cool. And the scene where Bill Skarsgård gets to go full, like, no makeup at all, and he's putting makeup on throughout the scene, and he's just being the best Pennywise ever. I know I haven't seen too much of Tim Curry, but that scene alone is just perfect. I love Bill Skarsgård in this movie. I think he is a bright, shining spot. Every time it's just him in the clown makeup, no CGI. It is awesome, and this scene really just puts the spotlight on Bill Skarsgård. And I also love the entire sequence with Richie and Eddie. Richie with the statue, and then Pennywise saying that wonderful line of him being like, "Oh, nobody ever wants to play with the clown," or something like that. I need to figure out exactly what that line is, so I'm going to quote that all the time. It is so funny. And of course, Bill Hader is just hilarious in this entire sequence. And even Finn Wolfhard and his sequence is really good. And then with Eddie's sequence, he's, you know, going back to the pharmacy, getting his meds, and the creepy old guy is back, and it's really weird. He goes into the basement, he's trying to save his mom, which is a very weird scene. There's like a zombie leper thing that's chasing after him, and it's kind of very important. By the end of the movie, you find out that Eddie in that scene figures out how to really defeat Pennywise, which ends up being a huge thing by the end of the movie. But I actually really enjoyed Eddie and Richie in this entire movie. Both of them are fantastic. Their entire storyline, and the subtle love story between Richie and Eddie, and how Richie always admired Eddie, and he liked him, but he never got to really say it. I thought that was very sweet. I loved all of that. That was also some of my favorite stuff in the movie. Even though this entire sequence, this entire second act kind of does drag on, I thought it works really well. Just those individual scenes separated from each other, and I think if you were to re-edit the movie, it could work even better. And once everybody gets their relics, Bill goes off chasing after this kid that he ran into earlier in the movie, and he's trying to save him from Pennywise. And this is also one of my favorite scenes in the movie. You see it also in the trailer when he's in the fair, and then Pennywise is behind the glass, and this poor kid is stuck in there. It's brutal. The kid dies. I'm sorry, but I thought that was entertaining. And that entire sequence, it causes Billy just to go just pure anger at Pennywise, and he goes to the Neibolt Tree house, and everybody meets him there. And it's just, this is where we get towards the end of the movie, which probably my biggest issue in this entire thing is this entire plan, what is the ritual that they have to perform. I forgot what it's called, but it is really pointless, which makes that entire second act kind of pointless, which is probably my biggest issue with the movie. The entire ritual does not work, which I was kind of half expecting, but they could have at least explained it. Like, Mike could have told them what the plan was, what the actual mission was, what the ritual was before going down there, because they're there, they're holding hands, they're like, okay, what do we do now? Why didn't Mike explain what the ritual was before they got there? Just so we could have avoided that exposition scene. We could avoid a bunch of things that could have happened off camera, but they had to explain it in the moment, and I thought it just didn't work. They seemed so unprepared, and Mike just, his character wanting to be so prepared, it just didn't feel right. And obviously, for the movie to continue on, the ritual just needed to not work. Pennywise needed to get out. He needed to go insane and just go all out Pennywise, even crazier. This movie is very ambitious in what it decides to do with its villain character. It is crazy. This huge crab spider thing that he turns into is awesome. I know in the book he just turns into a spider, and a lot of people hated the ending of the book, hence why Bill is a writer who can't write any good endings. I thought that was a nice little nod. Also, Stephen King does make a cameo in this movie, which I thought was cool. But the overall, like, obviously the ritual needed to not work, or maybe they could have been like halfway through the ritual and Pennywise somehow fought his way out of it. I think that would have just worked better story-wise, so it wouldn't make that entire second act just completely inconsequential, because even Mike knew that the Native Americans failed when they tried this ritual, so why would he try it again? It felt very much like something that happened in Pet Sematary, where that the neighbor character in the book and in the original film and in the new remake that came out this year, they are all dumb. Why would you bring someone back to the pet cemetery if you already know it's going to kill everybody? Like, why would he do that? Why would he perform this ritual when you know it's not going to work? I know if you truly believe he thought that would possibly work. I thought he was a traitor at first, which I thought would have been a lot cooler of a twist. And like the whole point was to bring them all together so Pennywise can get all of them, because it's been 27 years, like he says in the trailer. I think they could have really done a lot of different stuff. I know this is how it is in the book. It just does not work on screen in this movie. But all that being said, the entire finale of this movie, like I said, is completely nuts, and I loved almost all of it. And one of my favorite characters in both movies ends up dying. Eddie gets stabbed through the chest by one of the spider leg things, and it is very sad for Richie. This is probably the saddest thing in this entire movie, besides the whole Stanley debacle. But it's just so brutal and so sad. And they had that moment where they go to the three doors that says not scary at all, scary, and very scary, and there's the dog behind the not scary door. And oh my gosh, Bill Hader, and I need to hold on, give me 1 second. James Ransone plays Eddie, the grown-up Eddie, and he and Bill Hader are fantastic in this scene. I love them throughout the entire finale of the movie, and just him playing Eddie, like I said, the casting is incredible, but him specifically, not only did he look like Jack Dylan Grazer, who played Eddie in the first film, but he acted like him, and he had that same fear as him, and the same mannerisms, and it was such perfect casting. And Bill Hader as an older Finn Wolfhard is... like, are you sure time travel is not real? Are you sure Jessica Chastain is not the actress Sophia Lillis just grown up? I'm convinced that it is. I'm not sure. Maybe we transferred like into the future 27 years and we're watching this. I don't know. The casting is just perfect in this movie. And the entire finale, it's super intense. And I think another issue I have with this movie is there's probably about 2 or 3 really intense scenes. One of them is when the Stanley's head turns into a spider. That scene is a complete homage to The Thing, which I absolutely love The Thing. But it is such a good scene. It's such a good homage, and it's very tense. It's probably the most tense moments in the entire movie. And the finale has some tense moments, but compared to the first movie, it does not have nearly as many tense edge of your seats moments as that one had. This movie is really kind of focused on the characters, you know, all of them going on their individual journeys, learning about their past, and kind of why they are the way that they are currently. This movie's more focused on character than really being tense and scary, which it still has tense and scary moments, don't get me wrong, but I don't really get scared by movies, and when I say that about a movie, it really means it does not have much at all. The tense moments are very limited in this movie, but the ending does go all out, very ambitious. There's a lot of things that happens. I can't even, it's a long movie. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. It definitely did not need to be 2 hours and 45 minutes. But I think it does have such a climactic end that does not disappoint, that I think it's worth it by the time you get there. So the losers find out that the only way to defeat Pennywise is to belittle him and to make him small so they can truly handle him, like Eddie showed them earlier in the movie when he was choking out Pennywise earlier. And they are belittling him, they're bullying him into being small, and he turns into this baby Pennywise. He turns into a puddle of himself, and they rip his heart out, and they all collectively crush it. And that is the end of Pennywise, who Bill Skarsgård, let me just give him one more praise in this video. He is excellent in this movie, and I wish they gave more time of him just in general, but him being as himself, not as a CGI monster. I wish there was more of Pennywise as the clown, as Bill Skarsgård. There was a lot in this movie, probably a lot more than there was in the first one, especially because that one scene with Beverly, but overall, Bill Skarsgård just makes this movie perfect, along with everybody else in the cast. Props to Bill Hader. James McAvoy is probably the least believable, mainly because I know James McAvoy from so many other movies that I just know that's him, whereas everybody else, they kind of melted into that character. Like Eddie was Eddie, Richie was Richie, Beverly was Beverly, but James McAvoy was Bill. So it didn't work as well, but he was still really good in this movie. But I think that's the best thing to praise about this movie is the entire cast, the entire sequence. Everything story-wise worked for me besides the whole ritual thing that kind of felt pointless. But every scene individually, if you take that scene of Beverly going to find her relic, all of that stuff worked. It's just by the end it seems kind of pointless. But overall, I enjoyed almost every scene in this movie. My main issue, like I said, was probably the ritual thing. But above all else, like I said at the very beginning of this review, the whole Stanley thing just blows my mind. The end of this movie has a very strong message about friendship and about how your past kind of defines you and how it's good to remember, even if you have to remember the bad things, it's also good to remember all that for the good moments as well. If you lose a friend, it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your mind around, but it's those memories that you have with them when they were still around, when you were having good memories, that's the things that's important. The only problem is, in Stanley's suicide note letter that he sends to everybody, it says okay, this is a strategic move. I'm taking my own life because I'm the weakest in the group, and it's a strategic move because if we're not all there, then you're all gonna die. That message is strangely just it goes so far into that whole subject that it gets into 13 Reasons Why territory, which I kind of defend the first season of 13 Reasons Why. The second, especially the third season, absolutely not. I understand all the arguments against it, but this movie reaches dangerously close into the negative side of those things where what message are they really trying to send with that letter? I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel right at all. It felt really dirty, and I felt gross after, like, and that was one of the last things that happens in this movie. I felt gross, but I did like where all the characters ended up. I like how Bill is writing a new script, and he thinks he knows how it's going to end this time. Ben and Beverly end up being together, which is awesome. I think they were perfect together. Mike is finally leaving Derry. Richie etches his name in the bridge with R plus E for Eddie, and then poor Eddie had to die. I miss Eddie. He was so good. But I love where all the characters end up. I just don't like this Stanley letter. I think they utilized the kid version of Stanley very well, especially in that scene, the flashback where Richie goes to the synagogue and he sees Stanley, up on stage, and he kind of tells everybody to fuck off, and it's great. It's an amazing scene. But I think they used the child version of Stanley very well, and the adult Stanley looked exactly like him. Like, my God, the casting is perfect. But he's in 2 scenes in the movie, and they kill him off in such a horrible way, and just none of that sat right with me. And apparently it's not in the book, so that is a full thing just for the movie alone. So I think that is just it just didn't work for me at all. Overall, I think I really enjoyed this movie. I didn't love it. I think I'd probably, if I were to put a number to things, which I usually don't do in this channel, I'd probably give it like a 7 or a 7.5. There's a lot of great things in this movie, and most of the scenes I really did enjoy. Just how things are strung together. I think this movie could have really worked as a 5-hour-long epic. If someone can please take the movie and the second movie and they meld them together, they re-edit the whole thing to where it's more like the book, and kind of like The Haunting of Hill House, where it kind of starts off as the adults, and one day they try to discover things, it cuts back to their past and kind of see things that way. I'm pretty sure that's how the book ends up going about. But I think if you edit these 2 movies into one long 5-hour epic like the Kill Bill, the whole bloody affair cuts, I think that would be amazing. I think that's what they should do with this movie. Or like the Hateful Eight. They made an extended version of Hateful Eight on Netflix, and they made it a miniseries. Do this with it. Make it a miniseries. You have all the content. Just re-edit it and make it awesome. Warner Brothers, if you're watching this video, please do that. Or if you're a fan out there who knows how to edit, I honestly might do it myself once I get access to both of these movies. And like same thing with Passengers. I've been trying to find a Passengers cut where it starts off with Jennifer Lawrence instead of with Chris Pratt, and they find out that Chris Pratt woke her up later on in the movie. And like that would be awesome. So I hope they do something with that in this movie. But anyways, guys, that is my overall thoughts on It Chapter 2. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more recap and reviews, full spoiler videos just like this one, I know it's probably a long one. I talked a lot about this movie. There's a lot to take in. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. Just enjoy it. Go to the movie, go to the theater, go to the big screen if you haven't seen it already. If you don't care about spoilers and got to this point, I don't know what to tell you. I just spoiled the whole thing, but there's a lot that I didn't touch on, so go check out this movie. Have any comments below about anything that I missed in this review that you want my thoughts on, leave them below. And thanks guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and I'll see you all in my next one.